Hello everyone, welcome to those who haven't been here before, welcome back to those who have watched before. Thanks for coming again. My name is Leah Langley and we're here to go over the 5 books I read in November 2025. Let's just jump right in, but I guess before I jump right in, I always like to remind people you could find me on Goodreads at Leah Langley to check up on my reads, look at all my highlights and notes for the books. I always try to get a Kindle edition of the book because it links the platforms together. So yeah, wanted to just say that. Let's get going with the first book I read this month of November. I kind of had like a slower, not even necessarily a slower reading month, but like this book I didn't finish until like midway through November. I think it was like maybe November 13th or 14th. I was kind of dragging on it, but it was a book I had for a while in my stack of economic texts that I bought at the beginning of this year that I wanted to make sure I got through. But that book is The Meritocracy Trap by Daniel Markovits. How America's foundational myth feeds inequality, dismantles the middle class, and devours the elite. Like I said, this book I had for a while. I've seen some videos of Daniel Markovits around, and it looked like an interesting book, and I've always been very recommended to me and when I was looking up these kind of things. And it was a really good read. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. Let me read a little bit about it, and then I'll give my review. A revolutionary new argument from eminent Yale law professor Daniel Markovits attacking the false promise of meritocracy. It is an axiom of American life that the advantage should be earned through ability and effort, even as the country divides itself at every turn. The meritocratic ideal that social and economic rewards should follow achievement rather than breeding reigns supreme. Both Democrats and Republicans insistently repeat meritocratic notions. Meritocracy cuts to the heart of who we are. It sustains the American dream. But what if both up and down the social ladder, meritocracy is a sham? Today, meritocracy has become exactly what it is conceived to, a mechanism for the concentration and dynastic transmission of wealth and privilege across generations. Upward mobility has become a fantasy, and the embattled middle class are now more likely to sink into the working poor than to rise into the professional elite. At the same time, meritocracy now ensnares even those who manage to claw their way to the top, requiring rich adults to work with crushing intensity, exploiting their expensive educations in order to exact a return. All this is not the result of deviations or retreats from meritocracy, but rather stems directly from meritocracy success. This is a radical argument that Daniel Markovits prosecutes with rare force. Markovits is well placed to expose the sham of meritocracy, having spent his life at elite universities. He knows from the inside the corrosive system that we are trapped within. Markovits also knows that if we can understand the meritocratic inequality produces near universal harm, we could cure it. When the meritocracy trap reveals the inner workings of the meritocratic machine, it also illuminates the first steps outward towards a new world that might once again afford dignity and prosperity to the American people. So like I said, 4 out of 5 for me. I thought it was a really engaging book, a really interesting book, and let me just give my little thoughts on it here. The Meritocracy Trap is an excellent, eye-opening look at the myth of meritocracy and how deeply it shapes our lives. Markovits does a great job showing that this system doesn't just disadvantage the have-nots, but also traps the haves in a cycle of pressure, overwork, and constant competition. As the subtitle states, it feeds inequality, dismantles the middle class, and devours the elite. Everyone is caught up. I appreciated how balanced and insightful the book was, and I didn't necessarily expect that in a sense. Like, it breaks down how both sides suffer under a system we've been taught to see as fair and natural, and it made me want to continue to dig deeper into education, work, and opportunity in America, and how deep the inequality is today, really. And I highly recommend it. Yeah, I don't know what this book, I kind of was thinking that it was going to just, I don't know, I appreciated the perspective of the other side as well, in terms of like the elites and the kind of system they get brought up into a lot of times, and it's like the constant rigor of that what that life could entail for some people in those spaces, or maybe people who don't even necessarily grow up in those spaces but do those kind of very demanding jobs. Like I can think about lawyers, let's say, because I know lawyers, whatever, like that. It's crazy. It's a crazy world, and it doesn't benefit them in the long run, and it certainly doesn't benefit the have-nots, as it kind of says. And I thought it was just a really good read. One I definitely recommend. Like I said, I've seen some videos of Daniel Markovits around. I feel like he's a really great speaker as well. I'd recommend some of those. If I can find any, I'll link them below that maybe I recommend. But yeah, good book. First book for November, 51st of the year. Good one. Next one I have here second book for November, and this is book 52 for the year, is Empire of AI, Dreams and Nightmares in Sam Altman's Open AI by Karen Howe. I don't remember how this came across my like view, but it was one I was waiting for from the library for a very long time, and it finally came, and I was like, oh great, like I could finally read it. I'd heard a lot of good things. I think it might have come up potentially after I read Apple in China, which I read a couple months ago. He might have mentioned it in there, maybe, or maybe it was around there. I don't fully remember, but it definitely was one that I was interested in, and I just wanted to basically pick it up and read it. I'm going to jump straight to my review, but essentially this is a book from, she's a AI expert and investigative journalist, and she began covering OpenAI in 2019. And when she began covering them in 2019, she thought they were the good guys. Let me jump right to like my thoughts on it. I gave this a 4 out of 5 for my review on Goodreads. Empire of AI is an incredibly expansive and eye-opening look at the rise of Sam Altman, OpenAI, and the systems that allowed tools like ChatGPT to become so influential so quickly. I went into this book like knowing the broad strokes of like AI and some of the bad things of it, like the environmental cost, the labor exploitation, job loss, etc. How it grounds all these issues in concrete reporting and human stories that make the consequences feel far more real. Hearing directly from these people on the short end of the stick was especially striking for me. Like we were hearing a lot of people like in like the global south who maybe like they put all these data centers in or they exploit them for work, all these kind of things, and hearing their stories directly. And of course some stories as well. She had some peppered in there for those in the United States, but especially the global south. And it's not just AI, it's taking advantage of that sector. We know that happens all over the place, but anyways, I'm not a completely anti-AI person, but I'm also not a pro-AI person. And as I feel at this point, it's become, there's more disadvantages than advantages if not appropriately regulated, which is right now, it's not be and will not be in a sense, because you have these rich and powerful people with so much influence running the show. And when we think about profit, speaking about only thinking about profit, learning that OpenAI began as a non-profit and only pivoted once they had a hit product was one of the many moments for me in this book where it made me be like, oh wow, like in the power dynamics and profit motivates, like how they motivate people, like it feels impossible to like ignore that. Because like when I found that out, I was like, oh, like that's okay. One quote that I have from the epilogue that I wanted to say, it stayed with me and it really captures the book's central theme of like how kept peppering in like this whole idea of, again, the book is titled Empire of AI, and like relating it to like empires of old and how this is like a different kind of empire, but it's still an empire in a sense. And so like that theme about like data, power, and who pays the price. It's like a quote, but also Hal has some little bits in here. So I'll like save the quote kind of here together, but this is like direct from the epilogue. I just pulled and put it on. Data is the last frontier of colonization. This is how again now. The empires of old seized land from indigenous communities and then forced them to buy it back with new restrictive terms and services if they wanted to regain ownership. This is from the quote again. AI is just a land grab all over again. Big tech likes to collect your data more or less for free to build whatever they want to, whatever their end game is, and then turn around and sell it back to you as a service. This is a quote here from Keone Melahona, who is a woman who is basically like, she's been affected by AI and stuff like that, I believe, like in her community, and is trying to like basically like fight back against it to some level. Her story is detailed in the book, as many others are. I think in general, if you're interested in understanding about like the real world cost of AI beyond the hype in a sense, this is definitely a sobering and essential read. It's quite a long read, or maybe it felt kind of long. It was like a little under 500 pages, but I feel like I saw some people being maybe a little bit critical of like this was maybe like too long. You could have had this been shorter, but I appreciated like she really went into a lot of the different areas, and again, kind of showing this slow build in terms of like Altman's personal life, who was the CEO of OpenAI, also just OpenAI as a business in general, kind of going into all different kind of things and seeing how the company and how Altman has evolved in these years that she's been covering the company, and like seeing the rise. And obviously ChatGPT is something that most people have heard of and might even use. It obviously just burst onto the scene into the scene a couple of years ago. Maybe it was just kind of like in its little like, Silicon Valley, like, small situation, where now it's like pretty much everywhere and everyone knows AI is something we talk about all the time, not necessarily just ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is definitely a leader, if not the leader in that space at this time. And it was just really, really interesting. Yeah, I gave it I don't know if I said, but I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. Definitely a good read. I believe I gave all these books a 4 out of 5 actually this month, but well, maybe not one. Anyways, I mean, I gave ahead myself too much. Third book for November 2025, and this is book 53 for the year. It actually works well because all these books are like 51, 52, 53. Anyways, 53 for the year is Nickel and Dimed on Not Getting By in America by Barbara Ehrenreich. This book was published in 2001. The copy I had was the 20th anniversary edition, which was nice actually because we had a new introduction from Matthew Desmond, who is an excellent sociologist and writer. Let me jump into this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. Nickel and Dime is not what I expected, but in the best way. I went into it thinking I'd be reading either like a sociologist outside perspective on poverty, as Matthew Desmond did in Evicted. Again, it's Evicted. I'll link that talk for Evicted below that I spoke about it probably in April 2024 when I read it. Excellent book. Matthew in that book, he's a sociologist, as I mentioned. He like lived in Minneapolis, so he was like in the area, but he was still like, it was outside perspective. He wasn't like going through like what his people he was covering was going through necessarily. So I was kind of preparing for maybe a book like that, or a book like a lived experience memoir like Stephanie Land's Maid. I was kind of surprised though, like basically no, it wasn't either of those. It was like Ehrenreich was putting herself directly in the situation of basically working low wage work. And of course she acknowledges right away, like she's never fully going to experience what it's like to be in these situations because she has like a safety blanket there. She set guidelines for herself, like I will never go hungry, I'll never be homeless, whatever. So she had like and obviously it's an experiment and she's doing research, so she could pull the plug whenever she needed to, which she kind of did, like especially in her first city where she speaks about. She takes us through 3 cities during this time. She's waiting tables in Key West, Florida, as I mentioned in that one. She like it was like everything has like a section to it. She basically like just stopped working one day, like just like it was like a very crazy hectic day. She was almost at a month, I believe, of being there, and just basically walked out of the store. And she, anyways, she was waiting tables in Key West, Florida. That's the first place we follow her. Cleaning houses and working in a nursing home in Portland, Maine, and becoming a Walmart associate in Minneapolis, Minnesota. For a little bit, she was maybe going to be like at Menards too, but it didn't work out or whatever like that. Anyways, reading about her experiences, navigating these jobs and these new situations she was placing herself in. The effects it had on her were many in different ways, like suddenly needing ibuprofen to get through each day. Her overall struggle, even with advantages like having a car, having emergency funds, and again, like the safety net that I spoke about before, and the option to quit if necessary makes it painfully clear how stacked the system is against people trying to survive on minimum wage. And if she can barely get by with those advantages, what chance do others have who don't have those kind of like extra chances and extra kind of safety blankets, that whole kind of thing? This book is sharp, it's engaging, it's still incredibly relevant 20 years later. I think sadly it's even worse for people now. And again, this is 2001, so now it's been 24 years later since I read it. But yeah, it's a clear-eyed look at the harsh realities of low-wage work and how impossible it is to get ahead even when you do everything right. An excellent and important read for anyone interested in inequality on the daily realities of working class life. And I definitely recommend it. I think it's a really great work. That's Nickel and Dimed by Barbara Ehrenreich. All right, next book I have here, book 4 for the month and 54 for the year. A book that I was really excited to read. It's called In This Economy, ? In This Economy, How Money and Markets Really Work. This is a book by Kyla Scanlon. I had seen Kyla, I believe, I might have seen it for the first time on The Daily Show. She's never come across like my For You page or anything like that. Maybe she had it after I saw her on The Daily Show, but she is a young woman, like a Gen Zer, who basically was like, she's an economic commentator and Bloomberg contributor at this point, and she specialized in human-centric analysis and demystifies the complex. The book talks about, I forget who the introduction was by, but talks about how Kyla kind of came on the screen and kind of like was making videos about the whole vibe economy type thing, or vibeonomics, and was trying to tell people about like how vibes can influence the economy, things like that, and eventually wrote this book, and it's a really great book. And for me in general, I really appreciated how Scanlon breaks down the economy in this book. And at the start of this year, as I kind of mentioned, or I've mentioned briefly before, like I set a goal to read more economic text and to deepen my understanding of how economies work, both in the U.S. and globally. And in this economy, it turned out to be the kind of guide I was hoping for. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. The book is incredibly accessible, has helpful illustrations and graphs that keep things engaging while explaining concepts that can otherwise feel overwhelming. Like reading this book, earlier this year, maybe in the summer, maybe in June, or I forget when, but in the summer, I read Growth by Daniel Susskind. He's a economics professor at I forget the big London School of Economics. And I remember reading that book, and he was obviously centering on growth there, but I remember reading it and really kind of being like, wait, like trying to keep up with what's going on. Obviously, I'm hearing from someone who's like doing economics all the time, and I could feel in some way, I feel like obviously it could have been, I don't know, I feel like that book was, for me, it was kind of like, I thought it was a great book and things like that, but it was kind of like, I was trying to like keep up with everything going on. I was like, I'm trying to remember some of these terms, or even learn for the first time some of these terms that he was speaking of. And it was kind of, it felt like for me, I remember reading it and kind of feeling like, okay, I could probably read this a couple times, because I feel like he's talking to like maybe someone else who's like in the economics world, and I am not in that world. Like, as I kind of have jokingly said, I haven't really picked up an economics like textbook type thing since high school. And yeah, I know some things about it, but I wanted to continue to learn about it in these years, and I felt like Scanlon's book was just so great for that. For me personally, it feels like she covers the full range of the economic landscape, even though I know technically she's not, but it feels like she is in a sense. How different sectors interact, how one shift can ripple into another, how the overall vibe of the economy shapes markets before markets actually even change, how someone's feelings or a community's feelings can like shift the way things are happening in a sense. And her discussions on the whole vibe economy, as I mentioned briefly, was quite interesting, and it made me realize how much sentiment and perception can influence real outcomes, as I kind of just laid out. And I found this book just really helpful and enjoyable, actually. Reading it, I read it like a textbook, and I was like, it helped me deepen my understanding. You should see how many, if you look at my Goodreads, you'll see how many highlights I had. I was highlighting that thing like crazy. I came away feeling so much more confident about the basics of the bigger picture, and I think it's a great pick if you want an approachable, entertaining, and insightful intro into how the economy really works. And I thought it was just really great book. And I feel like it's marketed towards younger people, like, you know, Gen Zers, like younger millennials, things like that, whatever. But I think it's obviously a book for anybody who just, because again, as I said, she makes it so accessible. And she really just goes into so many different things, so many different sectors. The chapters, you can just go on one chapter. I actually want to like buy the book, because I kind of want to like look through it again and like have it as something I could like even go back to as a resource, because I feel like the way she explained things so well, like, again, I know it's not the full picture of things, like you can never really get a full picture in a book of any topic, but I feel like the way she went over things was just really great, and I really enjoyed this book. It's a great read. All right, 5th book for November and 55th book for the year is Train Dreams by Dennis Johnson. This is a novella. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 on Goodreads. I picked up this book after watching the Netflix adaptation. I actually watched it twice in 2 days because I enjoyed it so much, and it was so beautiful. It's one of my favorite films of the year, like instantly it was. And if you don't know, I talk about movies quite a lot too, and I'll talk about Train Dreams some more. I can at the end of the year when I do like my favorites probably, but the film was just absolutely stunning. I'd recommend it so highly. It's on Netflix. Joel Edgerton is playing this man, Robert Grainer, who was a day laborer in the early 20th century American West. That's what this book is about. And that film made me curious about the source material, this novella. And this novella offers a similar experience. It's quiet, it's reflective, and it's centered on this man, as I mentioned. Johnson's writing is beautifully spare, tender, and evocative, and the story is almost haunting in a way, but like dreamlike quality that works well for the setting of Grainer's solitary life that he ends up living. And yeah, it's at the same time, I feel like it's a very understated book, subtle enough that some parts didn't land as strongly for me as the film did. But I do feel like to some level, like the film, part of the big reason I love the film so much, and also just like the story, of course, but if you watch the film, which again I highly recommend, the way that film is shot, it's just so gorgeous, and it just took my breath away watching it for the first time. It's gorgeous. I forget the name of the cinematographer, but I remember after watching, I like looked them up right away, and it's just like beautiful, beautiful. We focus on the book though. Anyways, this book though, I still thought it was very like thoughtful and a compact read, very short. Again, it's a novella, so you can get through it, very easily. Like a little over 100 pages, I think, or maybe just about there. And it adds some texture for the world that the movie builds. Some things that maybe the movie didn't get to go over or whatever, or what some of the little intricacies that Johnson kind of goes into. Really, really great film. I enjoyed reading the book, even though I didn't give it like the highest rating, like especially compared to the film. But yeah, definitely a good book, quick short book to read for the end of the month. Yeah, and those are the 5 books I read in November 2025. Yeah, we have one more month to go, December. I already finished my first book in December. I started reading at the end of November and I finished it. It's another one actually that's in my stack of economic text, and I want to finish the other 2 I have left before the end of this year. And I have some other ones I'm going to try to get and squeeze in. But as always, send me some recommendations on books. The year is getting towards the end, so we'll see how much time I actually have with some of these things. That's also a very big movie time. As I kind of mentioned earlier, I watch movies a lot, so there's a lot going on there, and obviously family things, all the kind of things, whatever. But send me recommendations if you have them for either this month, if I could squeeze them in for December, or the next year. Obviously, we have to continue to keep reading and doing the whole thing. Find me on Goodreads at Aaliyah Langley if you'd like to see my highlights and my notes on all these books that I've read. If you want to see my complete list of the year, I'll come back and post them all at the end of the year, obviously, as I always do. And I might even do a video later, just at the end of the year, of going over some of my favorites, but we'll see. It's a lot to go through, maybe, because it's a lot of books, but there's only so many favorites, I guess. I'm just rambling now. Thank you guys so much for watching if you made it this far. I appreciate you. I'll see you in my next book video, which will come the beginning of January after we finish this month of reads. But yeah, thanks so much. Send me recommendations. Find me on Goodreads. All the good things. Have a great one.